Now I want to give you an overview of just how we're going to go about studying ethics. So bear with me because what I'm going to do is give you an analogy to how to study ethics with how to study geology. So if you want to study geology, one of the first things you want to do is, well, go out there and look at some rocks. Look at some individual rocks like those along the bottom here and check out like the differences and similarities between them. See how hard some are compared to others, or whether there are, what the crystal structure of one is compared to the other. And then you start learning some things about the similarities and differences amongst different rocks. And then eventually what you want to start doing is figuring out, well, are there different kinds of rocks? Can we group these individual rocks into different classes or kinds? And so you move up a level and start thinking a little more abstractly and come up with theories about what makes some rocks fall in one kind and other rocks fall into another. So for example, you might think, right, some of these rocks are igneous and other of these rocks are sedimentary, and then we want a theory of what makes the difference between an igneous rock and a sedimentary rock. And a lot of times we do this in terms of, well, the causal history of the rock. So you would say, look, igneous rocks, these are the rocks that have been caused by the cooling of molten magma, whereas sedimentary rocks, these are rocks that have been created by particles of mineral or organic matter that have stacked up on top of one another and then been compressed under high pressure. So now you've got this theory about what makes one kind of rock different from another, even though, as you might see, some of the rocks in each of these categories they appear to be very similar to one another just on the surface. Once we've got this theory about what makes different rocks of different kinds, then we have a better perspective on how to think about rocks in general. And then once you do that, you can get really abstract and go up to the top level. If you're, say, maybe a theoretical geologist, you might ask really abstract questions like, just what are rocks in the first place? What exactly is the difference between, I don't know, a rock and a mineral? Or even, do rocks even exist at all in the first place? Is the category of rock something that is really a useful scientific category? Or really should we just be thinking totally in terms of molecular structure, and everything has molecular structure? Rocks aren't really an interesting sort of thing to study on their own in the first place. So there's a little overview of how you might think about how geologists go about doing geology. And this is a framework that extends to a lot of science and a lot of ethics too, for that matter. So let's see how this applies to ethics. So if you think about ethics, instead of looking at individual rocks, you can think along the bottom here of individual actions of, say, people spraying pepper spray at other people, or looking at documents in secret, or taking things from other people. And you can look at all these different actions and start to think about the different properties that those actions have. And you might start thinking, if you're an ethicist, well, I want to know which category these actions fall into. Are they morally wrong, or do they fall into the category of morally permissible? Just like the geologist wants to figure out, okay, for any individual rock, does it fall into the category of igneous or sedimentary, or, some other category? And just like the geologist came up with different theories about how to sort those individual rocks into different kinds, ethicists come up with different theories about how to sort actions into being wrong actions or morally permissible actions. And this is what is called normative ethics. Ethicists who work in this middle tier of coming up with the different categories and theories for what makes those categories of moral rightness and wrongness. These are normative ethicists. But then, of course, we can go up even more abstract again, just like we did with theoretical geology, and we can think about general questions about the nature of morality overall. So again, we could ask, just what is it for something to be moral or not? I gave you a little gloss on that in the last video. I said, right. Moral shoulds are shoulds that are categorical in a certain way. That's a meta-ethical question about what makes something moral in the first place. You might ask again, just do moral acts or immoral acts exist at all? Or is this all just one big kind of pretend thing where we claim that some things are morally wrong and morally okay, but in the end we're just kind of deluding ourselves? There is no right or wrong. Those are meta-ethical questions. So ethics divides up into these three different levels of thinking, just like geology does. Down at the bottom, ethicists who look at individual actions and look at their nuance and think about whether those actions are right or wrong. Those are practical ethicists. And then as we move up, the ethicists who think about what the correct categories of actions are and what makes one action fall into a category of moral wrongness or moral rightness. Those are normative ethicists. And then up at the top, we've got these meta-ethicists who are asking these super abstract theoretical questions about just what the nature of morality is at all to begin with. Now, most of our work in this class is going to take place down at the bottom level. We're going to be looking at the practical ethics of particular actions and situations that occur in the workplace. But the first couple weeks of class, I want to give us a quick overview of some of the meta-ethical and normative ethical theories so that we can use those to help think about these practical ethical questions. So this week we're doing just a little bit of meta-ethics to think about questions like, okay, so just what do we mean when we claim that something is morally right or morally wrong? Why should we care about whether something is morally right and morally wrong? And then finally, well, what's the difference between something being morally okay and being legal? Or between being morally wrong and being illegal? These are all meta-ethical questions that we're taking a bit of a look at this week. Then the week after that, we're going to look at a couple different normative ethical theories. So most normative ethicists agree about what the correct categories for ethics are. They agree that some actions are morally wrong and some actions are morally okay. But they come up with different theories about what makes an action morally wrong or morally okay. So what we're going to do in the couple weeks after this one is look at two of the major theories about what makes some actions wrong and some actions okay. And then that will give us a good position from which we can take a look at individual actions in the workplace and start applying those normative theories to try and figure out which actions are morally okay and which actions are morally wrong.